Interestingly enough, I always hated the idea of podcasts and hated the idea of running my own podcast. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Talk is Cheap, the Fight Against Mediocrity podcast. Today, you have me on the show, your host, Kevin Kartchner. Today, I'm going to do something cool. We've done 16 episodes so far, which is incredible. I can't tell you how grateful I am that you're listening, and also for those who have came on the podcast and shared their stories and their knowledge. Wealth of knowledge has been shared on this podcast, similar to a graduate degree. I mean, there's so much information that has been shared that can bring you riches in wisdom and riches in money. So what I wanted to do today is recap what I've learned so far, being the host of the Talk is Cheap, the Fight Against Mediocrity podcast, what some of my takeaways have been, and the direction moving forward. So I don't have like a script that I'm going to go off. I'm just going to, say what's on my mind about how it's been so far running the podcast. So interestingly enough, I always hated the idea of podcasts and hated the idea of running my own podcast. And as funny as that sounds, I always thought, if you're going to listen to something, why not listen to a book, an Audible, that's been crafted and created and vetted and edited, and the hundreds and thousands of hours have gone into it, so you get the best of the best. I just thought, why listen to a podcast? They're just kind of shooting from the hip, which I honestly think is true a lot of the time. But what I found is a couple of interesting things happen in podcasts. Number one, as the host, very selfishly, I get to ask questions to these very successful entrepreneurs and salespeople and real estate professionals and different people that we've had on the podcast. I get to ask them questions that I'm interested in. It's not like a book where the book is already written and you can't, ask the author, hey, well, what about this in real time, like a podcast. So that's one of the things that I've very much enjoyed. And I've started to listen to more podcasts now that I'm doing my own podcast. Dan's Millionaire Code is one that I really like. Alex Hormozy's is one that I really like. Russell Brunson's is one that I also enjoy. And what I found is podcasts are really real, like in your face. Hey, this is what's going on in my life. This is what's, going on in XYZ business, or here's what's going on in the economy. They're very up to date and real. So that's probably one of the biggest things that I've learned running a podcast is, it's really fun to ask real-time questions to these very successful people. Something else that I think has been a theme, and it's probably due to those that I ask and how I ask questions, but one of the themes that I've noticed that's been a very large part of the podcast is just start. Like, there's so many excuses for not starting. There's so many reasons to not start, but every single person who's come on the podcast has told of that defining moment where they had to say, I'm going to do it or I'm not going to do it. I'm going to shoot for this. I'm going to not shoot for this. I might fail. Like, there's always that point in their life where they're saying, it was hard, but I kept going and I succeeded. And that's probably the biggest takeaway for me is you're never going to be ready. Like, for this podcast, I wasn't ready to start a podcast. It was pretty funny because episode number 1 with Adam Webb, he got on like the Zoom call to do the podcast. And he's like, dude, this is awesome. So how long you been doing this? And I was like, you're actually, the first person to be on the podcast. And it was good. He was on it. He was very gracious and excited to be on there on the podcast, but I wasn't ready. There wasn't, I actually didn't read any books or go to school or anything like that. Just like, it was like, hey, let's do this. Let's start it. And it's interesting because a lot of people have come up to me and asked me since, like, man, that's so cool. You started a podcast. I wish I could do that. Or I really want to do that. Or I should do that. And there's a lot of shoulds, like I should do this or I should do that. I just found, like, just do it. Just start. You're never going to know everything. A couple of things that Kennedy, our director of branding, our brand director here at the Fight Against Mediocrity, something that we've learned together, her and I, is we actually created a Google form to send to the people that are going to be on the podcast to get all their information, get their bio, get their picture. Whereas before it was kind of scrambled. And so the first few episodes were that way, very scrambled. But then we got that system set up and now they're like a breeze. You know, I say, hey, do you want to be on the podcast? I send them that survey, that form, and then they fill it out and I have everything I need to go as soon as the podcast starts. So it's been very much streamlined, but you know, just start. Like there's so many reasons not to do things. And I talked myself in and out of the podcast for a little bit, but just start, like just go for it. You know, as Arnold Schwarzenegger says, if you fail, you know, the ground is only right there. Like that's all that's going to happen. You're just going to fall down and then you get back up. So that's probably my biggest takeaway. One of my favorite questions that was asked, that I asked, I mean, but it wasn't a question that I came up with. It's not like I spent hours thinking of this question, but it was with Pierce Show. And he also runs a podcast called The Young Entrepreneur. And he's had on some awesome people. He had Alex Hormozy on and I went and listened to that. And I asked him, you know, he's had the Iron Cowboy, who did 50 Ironmans in 50 days. No, 100 Ironmans in 100 days. Which is just crazy. And I think he did like 101 just for fun. And so he's had a lot of really cool, you know, successful people who a lot of them are high endurance athletes. And so I asked Pierce, I said, running your podcast, what have you learned from running your podcast? And his response was one of my favorites. He said, people are just people. And he said not to, you know, discredit anything that any of them have done because they've all done incredible things, like incredible things. But he said, at the end of the day, they're just people like you and I. And that hit me really hard because it's like Steve Jobs said, like everything in this world is made up by people who are no smarter than you and I. And I truly believe that. Some mess ups, some total failures that have happened on the podcast. I try to be like prepared, have everything set up, lighting and everything. But there was one day where my laptop wasn't plugged in. I was interviewing Jeff Lerner and the laptop wasn't plugged in. And so I started on pretty much dead battery. I plugged it in. We got started. I was like, okay, good. It's charging. And then like 20 minutes into the episode, my battery died and the podcast just ended. And I'm just like, oh crap. This is bad. Jeff Lerner's awesome, but like he's going to be mad. This is very unprofessional, like all these things. And then he texted me. He's like, hey dude, what happened? And I'm like, my battery just died. And Jeff's like, no problem, dude. You know, hop back on when you can. Let's keep going. And I was like, wow. Well, that was really cool of Jeff to just be so cool about it. And we hopped back on and my laptop was still dead. So I had to run upstairs, grab my wife's laptop. If you watch this one, you'll notice the second half of the video isn't very good because it wasn't on my camera. So I hopped back on with Jeff and he's like, dude, you would not imagine all the things that have gone through my different podcasts. You know, he says I've had the power go out during I think he said like a thunderstorm. Mike's gone out. He's like, anything that you can think of has happened. So no sweat. He actually recorded the rest of it for me, sent it to me. Like he was super, super cool about it. One of my favorite as well was Neo Davis. It was funny because when I was talking to Neo, like and you could probably, you know, tell that this is what I was doing, but I was trying to get him to talk about, yeah, I'm really impressed with all he does. He runs tons of Facebook ads, spends hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars a year on ads and stuff. So I was trying to run some ads at the time for myself and my wife's online boutique. So I was trying to get like the strategy out of him. Like, how do you do this? And he's like, dude, there is no strategy. Go find someone who knows the strategy. You need the mindset. And that's all he was about. He's like, you don't need to know everything. You need to be good at a few things, but go find someone else to do the rest. And he also talked about the concept of reaching forward, bringing your future self to today and paying for speed. Just looking through, man, there were so many good, so many good episodes. I think those were some of my biggest like aha moments. I always talk about with my wife, Dreadful Hippie, when we had Dallas and Ellie McGee on the show. One of the things that they said is their whole family, most of their family and friends were like, hey, go get a real job. Like, go get a real job, go do something that's going to actually make you money, because at first they weren't making a ton of money, barely making by. I know Dallas on the podcast talked about how his truck was going to get, or his Jeep was going to get taken by the repo man. And so they were hiding it, and they went to Ellie's house, family's house, to get dinner because they didn't have money for food. But they said, you know, I just felt the feeling that I had to keep going. And I've been really inspired by that. My wife and I, Lauren, have talked about that a lot. Like, just keep going. If you believe in it, just keep going. I'll probably do another one of these episodes recapping some of my biggest takeaways, but I just want you guys to know that, you know, I'm not perfect. I struggle. I have ups and downs, but I think one of the things that I'm really good at, and it's not because I'm naturally good at it, is my mindset. Like, I just believe that things can happen and that I can be successful and that nothing is out of reach. And I don't think it was because I was born like that. I think it's because I've surrounded myself with people and content that helps me believe that. Go look up Arnold Schwarzenegger most viral video on YouTube. It's like, I can't remember what it's called. I sent it to my wife Lauren this morning. It's called Arnold Schwarzenegger 2018, the speech that broke the internet, most inspiring ever. Like, in that video, he talks about a lot of things, the rules of success. And I've probably listened to that video probably, honestly, like 300 times, if not more, maybe even closer to 500. And I can pretty much recite it. But a lot of the things in that video that he talks about is like, you can do it. He says, I was just a kid from Austria with a dream. And whenever I set my mind to do something, I wasn't going to quit. He's like, I didn't have a plan B. I was going to go all at it. And that's what I want you guys to believe. That's what I believe. That's what I want to help you do. I have my ups and downs. I have my weaknesses. I have my days where I'm just like, I don't even want to do this. I don't want to get out of bed. And then I have my days like today where I woke up at 3 and was like, let's go. Like, let's go. Let's do this. But at the end of the day, like, just keep trying, just keep pushing, do the hard things when you don't want to. And let's do this together. I would love to hear your biggest takeaways from the podcast. If you're listening to this, go to Instagram, direct message me on Instagram at Kevin Kartchner. Let me know what your biggest takeaways have been. I'd love to hear them. Again, this wouldn't be possible without you. I get a lot out of it. I hope you do too. I hope you have a fantastic day today, and I hope you just crush it. Thanks for tuning in to Talk is Cheap, the Fight Against Mediocrity podcast, and we'll catch you on the next episode.